Hello, welcome to podcast episode 14. Can't believe we're at 14 already. You're most welcome. Today we're going to be talking about our new Ring of Fire moon coming up on the 17th of April. It's a new moon in the sign of Aries. And to honor Aries, I am wearing the red, which is very much associated with Aries and the passionate fire nature. So the sky is absolutely lit this month. It's really busy. We've got a stellium, so we have a series of planets that are all building in the sign of Aries. Today we've actually got Mars moving into Aries. But by the time we get to this new moon on the 17th, we will have Mercury, Mars, Saturn and Neptune all on top of each other in the early degrees, and then with the actual new moon we'll have Moon, Sun and the asteroid Chiron. So guys, this new moon will take place at 27 degrees and 28 minutes. That will be at 12:51 a.m. GMT. I'm based in the United Kingdom, so please adjust for wherever you are in the world. If you have your natal chart with you and you like to take a look at that while we're talking, then pay particular attention to around about 23 degrees to 29 of the cardinal signs. That's Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn, and roughly about 0 to 2 of the fixed signs. That's Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Leo. This is where you're going to feel this fire. So what's interesting with this new moon is it's happening at one of the late degrees, and we've had a lot happening at the degrees of about 27, 28. And with Aries being the first sign of the zodiac, the baby of the zodiac, it can kind of leap into things in a bit of an innocent, naive kind of way. But now it's at that 27 degrees. It's got a little bit of experience behind it. It's a bit more of the seasoned fighter. So let's get into some of the nitty-gritty of Aries. So Aries being the first sign of the zodiac is like the raw spark of life, the raw impulse to exist. It brings things into being. So it's the energy of birth, of initiation, and it's kind of at that first moment of consciousness, like the shock of the birth, but bringing that you know what, I'm going to do that again. Do that and shut it down. I know, sometimes you have to start again, and that's fine. So let's talk a little bit about Aries energy, right? So Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It rules the first house. It is the initial spark, the raw impulse to exist. It's the birthing, okay? And this is it's like that first moment of consciousness where Aries announces itself and says, I am here, I exist. So we link Aries to the self-identity. Psychologically, it represents the birth of agency, the will. And, well, anyone that's ever had a 2-year-old will understand that the Aryan impact kind of gets there and everything becomes no. So I realize I can say no. But really, like this will within us, this will to assert, it's where we realize that we have the agency of choice, where we can say yes or no to something, where we can assert and move forward. And what we notice with Aries is it's a sign that learns in motion. So it's not a sign that thinks very deeply. It's not a sign that needs to hold or wait. It's a sign that moves, and through that motion, it experiences. As the first sign of the zodiac, Aries likes to be first. It can be an extremely competitive sign. There's a definite passion with Aries that can also be very angry. So it has got kind of an intensely expressive side to it. It's not a sign that's known for being vulnerable like Pisces or Cancer might be. It has an inner strength and courageousness to it. And it's like the warrior. Thank you, Star. It's like the warrior going into battle. It kind of has to, in that moment, seize that. Let's talk a little bit about the shadow side. I always find the shadow side is more interesting anyway. So Aries being, this first spark, this leap before you think, has to really move on instinct. It's primal. It's raw and it's primal. And that can be really, really useful in situations where we need to act extremely quickly. Let's say there's a dangerous situation, a dangerous animal that showed up and we need to run. Aries isn't going to think about it, it's just gone. Or somebody comes at us and, on the battlefield and has a raised sword, then Aries can just stand up and fight. And these are all great traits. But there is always extremes. Aries being the first sign, it's definitely a very me first attitude. It's so from that, like, it can be pretty self-centered and selfish, really, because it doesn't think through its actions. It doesn't think about what it's doing. It doesn't think about how those actions are going to impact on somebody else. It can be restless, this needing to move, not really sure or intentional about it. I can't speak. What it wants to move towards. So without that intention, Aries can be quite restless and quite impatient. It doesn't really tolerate quiet or lack of motion for long. And because it doesn't filter things through the mind or slow things down, there is a tendency at times to be making unwise choices, right? So there's this urge to move, there's this urge to express, but there's not that kind of that little pause that allows you to really consider what you're moving for, what you're moving towards, and the impact on anything beyond that moment and anyone else. It can be quite a quick, forceful, and even a defensive energy, depending on that, I said about that passion and that anger and that frustration. It can get defensive as well. Yeah, there can be a desire to move for the sake of moving, like it's almost failed in some sense if it doesn't do that. So, a really good, well, I have an Aries moon, okay, and so I've learned that if I have a fleeting desire of something, I need to express a part of it, and then I need to go do something else. And that something else in typical Aries fashion is likely to be something that's kind of maybe an intensive form of physical exercise. So Aries does associate with being an athlete and definitely being a fighter. Boxercise is brilliant. Running's pretty good as well. Definitely a sprint, right, and not a marathon, okay? Aries is fast. So anything that kind of is quite physical allows Aries to kind of express that energy, but also slows it down enough to consider that desire of the moment. Is it just a whim of the moment? Is it just a fleeting fancy, or is it something that's a little bit more sustainable? And I think that if you've got Aries in your chart, you probably don't like hold on things. But I do wonder, do you ever find that, you know, that sometimes you just do something and you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done it. But I think if you've got something a little bit more weighty in your chart with that Mars, definitely in a conjunction, definitely in some kind of aspect, maybe maybe a Saturn. Saturn's definitely, you know, more contraction, restriction. What are my responsibilities here? What is the long-term consequence? Will definitely give that Mars action a little bit more oomph to it and substance, or even Pluto. And you know, there's a co-rulership here with Pluto. Like the ancient ruler of Pluto was actually Mars. So Mars being the ruler of Aries, so they're both associated with desire, they're both associated with survival. But with Mars, it's immediate, it's instinctive. With Pluto, it's soul level, it's deeper. So you get those two together, Mars will still want to act, desire will still be present. But with Pluto there, it's going to have a deeper. Another one on the shadow side is this Aryan need to fight. And in its extreme, it's just going to be highly reactive. Not so explosive, unless she's got it linked to Pluto there, which you might do, but it's going to be reactive. And it's that sense that, you know, Aries being the first time is kind of, it's so raw and so unfiltered. It's immature, you know. It just wants to say what it's got to say or do what it wants to do, and it can perceive other people as being gatekeepers or blocks. Now you can imagine if you're a young child with a very strong Aryan signature and, you know, you go, I want to do that. And your parents go, no, you can't do that. But I want to, right? Even when you get older, maybe you've got one partner who's definitely a lot more slower or steady and just says, no, we need to think about it, or, you know, no, we need to really strategize, or we'll come back to it in 3 months' time. I mean, that to someone with an Aryan signature is like death. Do you know what I mean? Because it needs to be so much in the moment. But yeah, you know, it can definitely fight if it really wants something. And you know, there's a learning here. Again, going back to this understanding of if a desire is just, I just need a pleasure hit right now, a dopamine hit, or whether what desire I have can be slowed down and sustained. Essence to it, it's going to be a lot more strategic, can have a bit more of that long-term gain with it. The new moon, 17th of April, 27:28, and at 12:51 a.m. GMT. And would you look at that? Look at that stellium here. Look, Neptune at 2, Mercury at 3, Mars at 5, Saturn at 7. So they're all in kind of the early degrees. And then we've got the full moon here, sun and moon together, bam, on Chiron. Okay, so that is a lot of Aries energy. That is a lot of fire. And especially, I think, with Mars there, you know, that really hikes it up. But what's kind of interesting about it, and where I was talking about kind of managing some of the shadow side before, is that all of this fire is kind of contained, and it's contained really because it's got Saturn there, and Saturn works as a brilliant container. Saturn's about boundaries, physical boundaries, geographical boundaries, and so it's really great at containing whatever energy is inside of it. And you can see it sits at the far degree here, it's at 7 degrees. So I think what can happen is that, yes, there is that fire and that assertiveness, and great things are going to get done, you know, whereas, especially with Mars has been in Pisces for some time, it tends to be very passive and receptive and, oh, should I do that? And kind of doubts itself. When it moves into Aries, it's got great impact. And it's brilliant to see that Saturn there because it's kind of tempered that energy just that little bit. It's going to contain that energy somewhat, which will help it channel better. We've also got Mercury there in Aries. And I always think Mercury and Aries can kind of go two ways. Can it be about, you know, very quick thoughts, thinking very quickly on our feet, which can be fantastic in any kind of situation. It can also be a little bit gunfire with its words. So it can be a lot of angry words with Mars and Aries. Again, I think that having that Saturn there a few degrees away may give it a little bit of restraint. You know, say what you got to say it openly, say it honestly, but do, you know, think about that responsibility you have to the outcome. Like, it's nothing is ever in a vacuum. Nothing is ever about that, just that moment. We also have Neptune there, so this is kind of the end of the sandwich. And we've had Neptune with Saturn for quite a while. And I've spoken about that in a lot of my blog posts and past podcasts. But they're starting to separate now. Now we've got those two personal planets in the middle. But Neptune's energy essentially is to dissolve. You know, it's a dissolving of the ego. Interestingly, what is Aries? Well, it's very egocentric to a point. So it's kind of going to give a little bit of a different dimension to that sense of desire. So that could look like, let me think, how do my personal desires relate to the grander scheme of things? Because Neptune is the association to the universe and universal energy, collective energy. It's very much the energy of flow. I said before it was, you know, quite passive energy. So you're going to get this kind of mixture of passiveness and assertiveness coming together. Now, I want you to bear in mind here that there is a tendency for the outer planets to dominate a little bit more. I don't think they'll take out the heat of that Mars and Mercury, but I think they're definitely like flanking it like that. They're acting a little bit as gatekeepers. They're very much containing it and very much bringing it into a little bit more of alignment. And that's something else Neptune can do. So it can dissolve some of the kind of really critical extreme side of it. Maybe give it, you know, a link towards kind of spirituality. And I always say the link to God, and I just want to explain this one a little bit more because obviously everyone has multiple belief systems. When I talk about God, I talk about this essence of something greater, which may be to you, which might be a religion. It might be a universal energy. It might be source energy, whatever you refer to as that. Gaia is another one. Something that is at a collective level, a greater force that permeates through. And I think with Neptune, there is very much this idealism, meaningful application that can happen. And, you know, could this be a time where you've been sitting on a desire to do something beyond yourself, to do something that has more gravity, more meaningfulness in the world, to give of yourself, because Neptune is, is really the quality of service, our service to something greater than ourselves. And so this is a time when we can start to back that with some action, do something that has the benefit of humanity and the universe as a whole. And also bear in mind the complexity that can happen when we have this kind of layered conjunction, because it's really a case of all of those planetary energies are kind of merging together. They're like ingredients in a recipe and you're just mixing them up in a bowl, so they kind of merge a lot. And so there's lots of different ways this could express for you or for us collectively. Another thought is that, Neptune can dissolve away parts of the identity that are outdated. So, parts of ourselves that we don't need anymore as we grow, because Mars to Saturn can be a maturing process. Mars being quite innocent and young and almost, the baby, the toddler of the zodiac. Saturn there can give it that kind of hike into adulthood. So can we gain this fusion where Neptune kind of dissolves away those kind of younger, unrequired parts of ourselves to let us grow into the person we can become? What I'd also like for us to look at here is a couple of other things. You'll see that the new moon itself is joined in, less than a 1 degree conjunction with Chiron. And the story of Chiron in Greek mythology is Chiron is known as the wounded healer. So was unwanted at birth, was unloved, was abandoned, spent many years by itself, was actually born a centaurian, so half human, half horse, and was eventually taken in and given a home, became very well educated, very wise, and then suffered a wound, an arrow, which, despite the arrow being moved, the poison was never removed, and so Chiron was left with this lingering wound. And what we tend to find with Chiron in our charts is it can be a space where we have this wound, or we have this something that causes us some kind of suffering, and we've always had it, we know it, it's very familiar, but for some reason we've never quite been able to remove the wound for ourselves. But because we know it quite well, we can actually support others with these kind of wounds. And although it seems such a sad story, there is something quite beautiful in it to be able to give that to somebody else. So when we look at Chiron in Aries, and we look at, what that wounding could look at, and bear in mind this is not, Chiron in your personal natal chart, it's Chiron collectively. We can relate that to what, should I even be here? Do I have a right to exist? A key, right, really deep core wound. Would everyone else be better off if I did not exist, if I was never born? And relate to the identity, whatever I am, is it wrong? Whatever I am seems to hurt other people. Or even to a point of, I don't know who I am. Like, I don't have a strong sense of identity. So I think, having this kind of series of Aryan planets, especially with there being Neptune and Saturn there, I think this will be quite fascinating in terms of how that could feed into that Chiron wound. Having the right to exist, having the right to be born, to be seen, to be expressed, to have desires. Do I have a right to have a desire? Do I have a right to have a desire and act on that desire? So there's a lot in here that could be about giving ourselves permission to say, yes to things that maybe we have said no to, or maybe we felt that we couldn't say yes to. Maybe there was some kind of block. And oftentimes when there's a block, the block is us, right? It's about opening up the mind to be able to be very consciously aware of what those blocks are and to move them out of the way. And I think with all this Aries energy, there's definitely opportunity here to be able to stand up, to be noticed, to have the courage to step into who we are unapologetically. And I think that can be something very difficult when we are conditioned throughout our lives. So we become, this imprint of conditioning that happens from birth, from our, maternal, our parents, extended family, even through to the social position that we're in, our schools, everywhere. We start to be imprinted on this, and we have people talking at us, kind of telling us who we should be. So, when we're looking at formulation of an identity that happens, there are a lot of external influences that impact on our internal understanding and authenticity of self. So this is a great time for some very, very direct questioning with Mercury there. Feeling this kind of safety of a container with Saturn there, that this could lead to growth, that this is not going to be a 5 minute, it's going to be longer term. Anything with Saturn is usually a longer arc. It slows things down, it gives us pace, steadiness, and patience. And often it does put a lot of things in the way, a lot of challenges in the way that force us to take our time. So the thing with Saturn, it often does have a bad rep. I have it quite intensely in my chart, and I've learned how to work with it. And really, it's a case of you're not going to get what you want right now. But I guarantee that if you work on it, if you do get it, it will be amazing. It will reward you through your hard work, I want you to think of Saturn like, you're studying. I did a degree and a master's, that's over 14 years of life studying, but at the end of that study, the end of that journey, you are given your certificate, you've got your accolade, and, you're kind of honored for your achievement. So Saturn does reward if we stick the distance. So, and I think, with this new moon and Chiron here, like, it could be painful. It could definitely be something painful in there. This thorn that keeps sticking on us. But, I do feel that if we allow with Neptune, if we allow for that process, if we give ourselves some grace and some compassion, it's very, very easy to give other people compassion rather than ourselves often. So, having that self-compassion, being able to talk truthfully and openly and boldly to ourselves within that safe container of Saturn, taking our time doing that, I think that's really important. What we've also got happening, and I just want to draw your attention, if you look to the left, you will see Uranus there as the purple symbol, and it's at 29 degrees, Yanaretic degrees. So 29 degrees is a critical degree in astrology. It is what we refer to as kind of the final breath. It's literally the last degree it will be in before it moves into a new sign. And soon Uranus is going to move into the new sign of Gemini, which is going to be a very, very different feel to it. If you are not a follower of Pam Gregory, then I do recommend, if you love astrology, take a listen to some of her YouTube videos on that movement. They're really very good. So, we've got Uranus here at 29 degrees of Taurus, and whenever a planet sits there at that final degree, it's like, this is my last chance. I call it last chance saloon. This is my last chance. And it carries with it like the fullness, it maximizes that particular archetype. So it's maximizing the sign of Taurus right now. And at this new moon, that's going to be significant because you've got all this Aries energy going on. So, you know, at the same time of all this happening, we've got this Uranus in Taurus looking to liberate, break away, break through, suddenly shift, gain a significant higher mind download. Uranus is like the lightning strike. So the energy of Uranus itself is quite sudden. It's a very erratic on off. I always call it names for different things. I call it the faulty switch. You know, it's electrical energy and it just suddenly hits, but it can easily switch itself off and then it will suddenly hit again. So this can kind of increase the erratic nature of the Uranian energy. But being more specific about it, that is going to relate to Taurian matters. So Taurus, like kind of bottom line here, is like our comfort zone. Taurus is where we find pleasure and where we find comfort. And I want you to imagine you've got like this erratic, shocking, sudden changeable energy hitting that at its maximum. And so it's almost like flipping us out of where we've got too stayed, too steady, too comfortable, because you can get too of everything, right? Can get extreme of everything. And sure, if we get stuck in these over comfort zones, then we limit ourselves, we limit our evolution. So this could be quite interesting in that, you know, it could really, we could gain internally this kind of major shift in our way of thinking, just suddenly go, aha, and oh my God, I need to get out of this. Taurus is also, it's an earth sign. It's very much about the natural earth. It's a very natural sign in general. It connects to the earth, it connects to the land, it connects to crops and the harvest and the seasons. It's very, very intertwined with nature. And I think while we've been seeing Uranus in general going through Taurus, we've seen, well, hell, pretty flippy weather. I'll tell you, like, the day before yesterday in the UK, it was 21 degrees. I was sitting outside in my vest and shorts sweating, right? 2 days later, it's gone to 4 degrees. Trippy. But we're seeing, like, in general, and we have seen for a little bit of time now, this shift in the climate, this kind of very erratic nature of the weather, and just these sudden kind of volcanic explosions and all sorts going on. Seismic activity. So yeah, very, very Uranian natured. So, you know, I think often astrologers see some, you know, an unstable sign like Uranus at 29 and all this Aries, and they go, oh, that's very trigger happy, isn't it? That's very warmongering. Not necessarily. I think the Saturn and Neptune there is going to keep that a bit more locked down, and it will be interesting to see how that's channeled. So I just want to finish up on the chart detail by kind of summarizing that, you know, yes, we do have considerable energy in Aries at this new moon, huge amount of fire, you know, so this is a great time to initiate, to self-motivate, to finally start things up that you've been thinking about and umming and ahhing about for quite a while. This is a time to press the button on it. I think too that with the heavyweights kind of forming gatekeepers to the Mars and Mercury in the middle is going to give us this slightly safer, slightly tempered container and more consideration for what those actions are going to be. I think there's going to be a longer term sustainability with those desires, which is really nice. Watch for that Uranus at 29. What I found is, especially when there's a planet at kind of that final degree, is that you kind of want to make your own choice on how that energy expresses. And so really consider for yourself, like, you know, where have I been over comfortable, and that I need to make a rapid change? You know, what am I awakening to that relates to maybe my comfort and my security and what I've been building? I want you to bear in mind here that Uranus can suddenly bring you something and equally suddenly take it away. And as this is a house of what we build and our resources, it can be one that really hits hard. And so really have a consideration of what you have, what is priority, what is really, really important to you, what is valuable to you in terms of your resources. And, you know, if anything destabilizes those, is it time for it to go? Whatever you've been kind of overly holding on to, I mean, you know, I say comfort and security, but it's also about this kind of deeper level of attachment. Like, my security is in the possessions that I own. You can't take them with you when you leave this place. So how much are they worth to you? No, I say how much. I don't mean tendency in monetary value, but how much worth do they have to you personally? What can you afford to lose? What can you afford to gain? You know, feeding this into these desires that you have, these desires that you now are in a position that you want to act on, you instinctively want to act on. How does that impact on the comfort and security that you've built? Because to me, like, initiating something new is a major change, right? Is it going to impact on your sense of security, your self-worth, your self-value? What new resources do you need right now to feed that new desire? Are they in alignment? Are they in alignment with, I was going to say God's plan, but, you know, whatever is fed through you, are they in full alignment? So as always, at the end of these podcasts, I'd like to leave with two things. One is a set of questions for reflection. I know you've just had a few. I'm going to give you a few more. And then a ritual. There's lots more questions. There's lots more rituals. There's lots more information on my blog post. I've popped the link below for you. So here are a few questions for you to think about in the lead up to the 17th. And I've just picked a few of them. As I say, there's plenty more on the blog for you. So the first one is, what truth have I been avoiding because acting on it would require courage? Oh, that's a good one. Aries has a tendency to expose the places where fear kind of masquerades as something else. So I think this question really cuts through the avoidance, the inner avoidance, or the inner deliberation that we can have. Another good question is, what part of me is ready to stop waiting for permission? Wow, look at that one. Even feeds into the Chiron theme there as well. You know, where have you been holding? Where have you been waiting? And what are you waiting for? Oh, very Gwen Stefani for you. As I say, you know, thinking and holding for something for a period of time to ensure that what that desire is sustainable is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. But if it is stopping you, if it is going on so long that it is stopping you from seizing some of that moment, seizing the juice at that moment and feeling that pleasure in the moment, then you've taken it to extremes. And, you know, this can really show where you've kind of been giving away your power elsewhere. Okay, we got one ritual here. Gosh, I wrote that down. It's really long. I'm trying to summarize it. So I think with Aries being a fire sign, being this initial spark, it definitely makes sense for you to have some kind of fire, safely of course, either light a candle, ideally a red one, but any color that resonates for you. We're starting to get warmer, so I imagine that bonfires are going to start happening. If it happens where you are that feels good, go for it. So this ritual, I'm going to talk it through as if it was a candle. So basically, you're going to light a candle, sit in the dark room, and I want you to let the flame represent the part of you that refuses to be shaped by fear, conditioning, or the expectations of others. I want you to see it as this first spark of creation, this first spark of bringing things into being. And I want you to really imagine in your mind what you can bring into being, right? What you can manifest through creation. I think that's beautiful. Thank you so much for being here and listening to me babble on, as I often do. I really value your support. If you would like to leave a message, please do. Nice things, okay? Want to leave a review, go do that. If you want to follow me online, I do leave clips and different things. I'm on TikTok and I'm on Instagram as Heart Horizon Astrology. We also have the podcast, which you can find under Astrology with Heart. It's on Apple, it's also on Spotify. So yeah, thank you, and see you in a few weeks' time.